Welcome back to the channel. If you're here late at night looking for a story to drift off to, you're in the right place. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe.
Ethan Cole was 21, a senior at Lone Star University, and had just finished the grueling final exam period in December 2020. The campus in Cedarwood, Texas, had grown quiet over the last few days, students streaming out for winter break. Ethan, like many others, was eager to get home to Houston, where his family awaited him for the holidays. There was excitement in the air, a short reprieve from coursework, the familiar comfort of home, and the small joys of family traditions that he hadn't seen in months. On the evening of December 13th, Ethan packed his car carefully. He loaded his laptop, textbooks, gaming equipment, and a few personal items he couldn't bear to leave behind. He double-checked the contents of his backpack, ensuring his wallet, keys, and phone were secured. The night air was crisp, the temperature hovering around 37 degrees, and a light fog had begun to settle over the quiet streets of Cedarwood. Ethan's parents had already warned him about the weather, reminding him to drive carefully. He assured them with a smile, more confident than he actually felt. Ethan drove north, leaving campus around 11 p.m., taking the familiar route that would lead him back to Houston. The roads were empty, save for a few other late-night travelers heading home for the holidays. He passed through the outskirts of Cedarwood and onto County Line Road, then onto Spruce Valley Lane. The drive was meant to take him just under 3 hours, a routine journey he had made countless times. But that night, something inexplicable would happen, something that would leave his family and the community of Cedarwood bewildered for years to come. Shortly after midnight, Ethan's car was found abandoned near a winding gravel road in the small town of Red Willow, approximately 30 minutes west of Cedarwood. The vehicle was in a state that puzzled first responders. The headlights were still on, the front passenger door was locked, and the keys remained in the ignition. The rear window had been broken, though investigators later concluded the damage had occurred during the crash. Ethan himself was nowhere to be found. Authorities pieced together a tentative timeline from the available data. They believed Ethan had traveled down East Austin Avenue, turned onto Magnolia Lane, and then onto Salt Flat Road, a narrow, poorly lit gravel route that winds through the wooded outskirts of Red Willow. The vehicle was found in the 2300 block of Salt Flat Road, abandoned just after midnight on December 14th. In the 50 to 67-minute gap prior to the crash, investigators could not determine Ethan's exact movements. His phone was powered on and connected to the cellular network, but there were no calls, messages, or social media activity during that window. His digital footprint went dark, leaving only the abandoned vehicle as evidence. The crash scene itself offered little clarity. The vehicle, a dark blue sedan registered in Ethan's name, had collided with 2 trees along a barbed wire fence line. The rear driver's side bumper struck one tree, and the front driver's side hit another, leaving minor damage consistent with a single vehicle crash. No other vehicles were involved. A volunteer firefighter had spotted the car from the roadside but did not enter, respecting protocol, and the responding officer also left the vehicle untouched. The following morning, Ethan's father, Richard Cole, arrived at the impound lot to retrieve some personal items. He found the car unlocked, Ethan's phone wedged between the driver's seat and center console. A small smear of blood was present on the driver's side door frame, though it did not indicate serious injury. Investigators found a cluster of items around the crash site, scattered within a 900-foot radius from the vehicle. Ethan's clothing, shirt, shorts, socks, underwear, sandals, and wristwatch were recovered, along with his backpack, a baseball cap, a plastic bag containing personal toiletries, and a travel tumbler holding a small, deceased betta fish. These items appeared to be what he had carried for the drive, untouched, undisturbed, suggesting no external interference. Inside the backpack, investigators located his wallet, small amounts of marijuana, a laptop, and gaming equipment. Lab analysis would later reveal traces of a hallucinogenic substance mixed with the marijuana, though it remained unclear whether Ethan had consumed it or if it played any role in the events that night. The cold December air raised additional concerns. Temperatures that evening had dipped into the mid-30s, and the wind added a biting chill. Authorities worried about the risk of exposure if Ethan had wandered from the vehicle in a state of disorientation. It was conceivable that he had exited the car, whether voluntarily or due to confusion after the crash, and had moved into the surrounding wooded area or barbed wire fence. Yet none of these explanations fully accounted for his disappearance. Richard and his wife, Meredith Cole, were left grappling with the unknown. They had driven to the crash site the morning it was discovered, hoping for answers, and instead were confronted with a series of incongruities. How could Ethan's car be in such a controlled state after a crash, with keys in the ignition, the front passenger door locked, and personal items scattered neatly around the area? Why was there no further damage consistent with a more violent collision? Why did he leave his wallet, phone, and keys behind, seemingly abandoning all means of communication and access? Investigators theorized about Ethan's state in those final moments. Some suggested he might have experienced disorientation caused by exhaustion, stress from final exams, or the possible ingestion of psychoactive substances. Others speculated about environmental hazards. Gravel roads can be treacherous at night, and an overcorrection on a curve could easily cause a vehicle to swerve, collide with roadside obstacles, and come to rest in an odd position. Yet none of these explanations fully accounted for his disappearance. The community of Red Willow rallied around the family. Volunteers assisted in the search, combing wooded areas, creek beds, and nearby trails. Local law enforcement deployed search dogs, drones, and helicopters, scanning every inch of the terrain, but all initial searches yielded nothing. The feeling of helplessness was palpable. For each day Ethan remained missing, the uncertainty deepened. Friends from Lone Star University shared their own confusion and concern. Ethan had been a careful, methodical student, someone unlikely to disappear voluntarily. He had no history of risky behavior, and his social media activity had not suggested any distress. His professors described him as diligent and responsible, the type of student who would plan for exams, pack his belongings, and head home without incident. While investigators examined the physical evidence, they also delved into digital footprints. Ethan's phone pinged at cell towers along Magnolia Lane and East Austin Avenue, confirming his movements prior to the crash. Yet there was a frustrating silence in the data. No outgoing calls, no messages, no signs of contact with friends or family during the crucial 67 minutes. Investigators were left wondering why a young man, alone on a familiar route, seemingly in possession of all his faculties, would vanish without leaving any trace. Inside his vehicle, the small details spoke volumes. The broken rear window, minor blood smear, and carefully placed personal items suggested a scenario in which Ethan had left the car voluntarily, perhaps to seek help after the collision, or perhaps in a confused state. Yet the lack of footprints, drag marks, or any signs of struggle complicated the narrative. How did he move into the surrounding area? Where did he go, and why did he not return? The items recovered offered hints but no definitive answers. His backpack, containing personal items, suggested he had intended to travel safely. The presence of marijuana combined with a hallucinogenic substance raised the possibility that he may have experienced altered perception, though this remained unconfirmed. The tumbler with the dead betta fish, an innocuous object to most, symbolized the strangeness of the scene, a carefully preserved relic of normalcy amidst the mystery. As days turned into weeks, search efforts expanded. Authorities reached out to residents in surrounding areas, requesting surveillance footage from private homes and businesses. Volunteers covered every trail, creek, and wooded area within several miles of the crash site. Yet, despite exhaustive efforts, there was no sign of Ethan. His disappearance remained one of those rare cases in which the environment, timing, and circumstances seemed aligned to erase every trace of a person. For the Cole family, each passing day deepened the pain. Richard and Meredith were forced to confront the unthinkable, the possibility that their son might never be found. They held on to hope, clinging to the faint possibility that Ethan could be alive somewhere nearby awaiting rescue. At the same time, they prepared themselves for the alternative, a reality in which the man they had raised, the young man full of promise and ambition, might be gone forever. As winter gave way to spring, the case grew colder. Investigators continued to review the evidence, re-examining timelines, revisiting witness statements, and analyzing environmental factors. They considered everything from disorientation due to exhaustion to accidental injury to possible exposure to drugs or hallucinogens. Yet no new leads emerged, no hidden paths were uncovered, and no additional clues came to light. Ethan's disappearance became a cautionary tale in the community, a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of accidents. Parents warned their children to drive cautiously on gravel roads, especially at night. Students leaving campus for holidays became hyper-aware of the dangers that could arise even on familiar routes. Despite the unknowns, one fact remained clear. Ethan Cole had vanished during a routine journey home, leaving behind a vehicle that told part of the story but not the whole truth. The small, scattered details, the clothing, the backpack, the broken window, the smear of blood, hinted at a struggle between normalcy and chaos. They painted a picture of a night interrupted, a journey cut short, and a young man whose fate would remain a mystery for years to come. And so the search continued, fueled by hope, meticulous investigation, and the unyielding determination of a family unwilling to accept the unexplained. Each day brought new questions, and each day left them with the same haunting truth. Ethan Cole was out there somewhere, and no one knew why he had disappeared on that cold December night. The morning after Ethan Cole's car was discovered, the reality of the situation began to weigh heavily on his family. Richard and Meredith Cole returned to the impound lot, hoping to recover more personal items, perhaps even a clue that would explain his disappearance. But all they found were reminders of the night's confusion. His phone wedged between the driver's seat and center console, a small smear of blood on the doorframe, and the belongings carefully scattered around the crash site. The sight of his laptop, gaming gear, and backpack, all untouched yet abandoned, was almost more painful than not knowing where he was. Authorities continued to examine the crash site and surrounding areas. Salt Flat Road was a narrow, gravel-strewn route winding through woods and small farmland on the outskirts of Red Willow. The investigators noted that the road was deceptively treacherous. Tight curves, intermittent guardrails, and hidden fence lines made it a challenge even in daylight. The collision itself seemed minor, but the location of Ethan's clothing, nearly 1,000 feet from the vehicle, suggested he had moved deliberately or perhaps stumbled in the aftermath. Yet how and why he had traveled that distance, leaving his clothes behind piece by piece, remained an enigma. A volunteer search team scoured the nearby woods with cadaver dogs, while helicopters with thermal imaging scanned the area from above. Every creek, trail, and wooded path within several miles of the crash was examined. Investigators focused particularly on Salt Flat Road and the surrounding rural properties. Local residents were contacted, and authorities requested surveillance footage from nearby homes, gas stations, and businesses. They hoped that someone somewhere might have seen Ethan or his vehicle during that critical 67-minute window before the vehicle was discovered. Yet as days turned into weeks, nothing surfaced. Surveillance cameras along the route captured Ethan's car at various points, but there was no footage showing him outside of the vehicle. No witnesses reported him walking, running, or encountering anyone else. It was as if he had vanished into the night, leaving behind the vehicle alone. Forensic teams returned to the site to conduct a meticulous review. The rear window had been broken, likely during the crash itself, though the pattern of damage puzzled some experts. The tiny blood smear on the driver's side door frame could have been caused by minor contact with barbed wire, foliage, or gravel road. It was not consistent with a violent attack. Items such as his backpack, baseball cap, and tumbler with a small betta fish were sent for laboratory analysis. Investigators noted that the presence of a hallucinogenic substance mixed with marijuana in his backpack might have played a role, but there was no concrete evidence that Ethan had ingested it. Even the small details of the crash scene raised questions. The keys in the ignition, the front passenger door locked, and the headlights left on suggested a person who either exited the vehicle voluntarily or had become disoriented in the cold night air. Investigators considered numerous scenarios: fatigue, hypothermia, accidental injury, or temporary confusion caused by environmental conditions or substances. Yet each theory seemed incomplete. How could a young man with no history of risky behavior abandon his vehicle in such a controlled state and disappear without leaving footprints or further evidence? Meanwhile, the community of Red Willow and Cedarwood was gripped by unease. Ethan's disappearance made national news, and neighbors and students alike were unsettled. Parents warned their children to drive cautiously on isolated roads, especially at night. Students leaving campus for holidays became hyper-aware of the dangers that could arise even on familiar routes. Despite the unknowns, one fact remained clear. Ethan Cole had vanished during a routine journey home, leaving behind a vehicle that told part of the story but not the whole truth. The small, scattered details, the clothing, the backpack, the broken window, the smear of blood, hinted at a struggle between normalcy and chaos. They painted a picture of a night interrupted, a journey cut short, and a young man whose fate would remain a mystery for years to come. And so the search continued, fueled by hope, meticulous investigation, and the unyielding determination of a family unwilling to accept the unexplained. Each day brought new questions, and each day left them with the same haunting truth. Ethan Cole was out there somewhere, and no one knew why he had disappeared on that cold December night. Meanwhile, Ethan's friends and classmates were interviewed extensively. They painted a picture of a young man who was careful, responsible, and unremarkable in his habits, someone unlikely to simply disappear voluntarily. There were no recent arguments, no conflicts, and no indications that he had been coerced into meeting anyone. Even the items found in his backpack, including marijuana combined with hallucinogens, did not suggest reckless behavior that would lead to this kind of disappearance. Theories abounded, but evidence was lacking. Authorities began considering environmental factors in more detail. Salt Flat Road had hidden dangers: steep embankments, barbed wire fences, and uneven gravel surfaces. The collision had occurred in an area partially obscured by trees, reducing visibility. Some investigators theorized that Ethan could have exited the vehicle to inspect minor damage, then wandered into the surrounding woods, perhaps disoriented by cold or minor injury. But even this scenario could not explain why he had left his shoes, socks, and clothing behind, or why there were no footprints leading from the vehicle. Psychological factors were also considered. Ethan had just completed exams, a stressful period, but nothing suggested extreme anxiety or mental instability. He had no history of depression or self-harm, and there were no notes or messages indicating suicidal intent. Friends described him as level-headed, responsible, and thoughtful. He had been looking forward to the holidays, to seeing family and friends, and to the normalcy of home life. All evidence suggested that he intended to return safely, making his disappearance even more perplexing. The Cole family faced the daily challenge of living with uncertainty. Richard and Meredith went about their work, but their minds were constantly on Ethan. They coordinated with law enforcement, participated in search efforts, and fielded media inquiries. Friends and relatives offered support, yet nothing could fill the void of not knowing. Each day without answers was another day of fear, hope, and frustration. Local authorities, including the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office and Cedarwood Police, remained committed to the case. They publicized their request for information from residents with cameras, dash cams, or security systems along Ethan's route. Even so, weeks passed without any new leads. Each call, tip, and sighting was investigated thoroughly, but ultimately proved inconclusive. The items left near the crash site continued to provide fragments of understanding, but no cohesive explanation. The backpack, laptop, and gaming equipment showed he had prepared for the journey. The presence of a small amount of hallucinogens alongside marijuana added complexity, though there was no confirmation that Ethan had used them. The travel tumbler holding the dead betta fish seemed almost symbolic, a small, mundane detail amidst a baffling disappearance. In the absence of evidence pointing to foul play, authorities leaned toward accidental or environmental explanations. They considered hypothermia, disorientation, and potential injury from the gravel road and barbed wire fences. Yet, even in these scenarios, Ethan's complete disappearance without footprints or disturbance of his belongings remained difficult to rationalize. Community awareness remained high. Flyers with Ethan's photo and details of his disappearance were posted in Cedarwood, Red Willow, and surrounding towns. Social media campaigns were launched, urging anyone who had been in the area on December 13th and 14th to come forward. News outlets covered the story extensively, highlighting the unusual circumstances and mysterious nature of the case. Despite the publicity, weeks turned into months and no trace of Ethan Cole emerged. Search teams revisited old locations, retraced his route, and analyzed the surrounding terrain for clues. Investigators reviewed weather reports, vehicle telemetry, and environmental conditions to understand how a vehicle could remain in one place while its driver vanished. But each theory remained hypothetical. For the Cole family, the uncertainty was perhaps the hardest part. Each day was filled with small reminders of the missing son, an empty bedroom, the absence of his phone notifications, the quiet around the family home. Friends and neighbors offered condolences, but nothing replaced the presence of Ethan himself. By early 2021, the official search was scaled back, though law enforcement remained open to tips and new information. The case was classified as an ongoing missing person investigation, with sporadic follow-ups and continued monitoring of relevant areas. The community continued to talk about the strange circumstances: a vehicle abandoned with keys in the ignition, a minor collision, and a young man who simply disappeared into the night. Even with the case growing colder, the narrative remained consistent. Ethan Cole, a responsible, methodical college student, vanished during a routine drive home after final exams. His vehicle suggested an accident, yet the surrounding evidence hinted at something more complex, perhaps a combination of environmental hazard and human error. The lack of definitive answers fueled speculation, theories, and the quiet, persistent hope of those who knew and loved him. And so, the search, both official and personal, continued. Investigators documented every detail, re-examined evidence, and remained vigilant for any clue that might finally explain the disappearance of Ethan Cole. For his family, each passing day was a reminder of the unknown, a puzzle without a solution, and the haunting reality that someone they loved could vanish so completely, leaving behind only fragments of a journey that should have ended at home. As weeks turned into months, the disappearance of Ethan Cole became one of those cases that seemed to linger in the air, an invisible weight over Cedarwood and the surrounding areas. For his parents, Richard and Meredith, life had become a careful balancing act between normal routines and constant vigilance. Every phone call, every visitor at the door, and every passing car brought a pang of hope, followed by disappointment when nothing new emerged. Authorities continued to treat the case with urgency. Detectives re-examined Salt Flat Road, retracing Ethan's steps and reanalyzing the crash scene with fresh eyes and new technology. They reviewed traffic camera footage again, combed through phone records, and sought out any potential witnesses who might have driven or walked near the area during the critical 67-minute window. Yet despite these efforts, the trail remained cold. The key question haunted investigators: how does a young man vanish so completely in a populated area without leaving more evidence? One of the more perplexing aspects of the case remained Ethan's abandoned clothing. His shirt, shorts, socks, underwear, and wristwatch were found almost 1,000 feet from the vehicle. Forensic experts noted no signs of a struggle, no drag marks, and no indication that anyone else had interacted with him. The dislocation of his personal items suggested either extreme disorientation or an intentional action, but there was no precedent for someone calmly removing clothing and leaving it behind while traveling through dense woods in near freezing temperatures. Richard and Meredith poured themselves into understanding every possible angle. They revisited Ethan's digital life, social media posts, emails, gaming accounts, and texts. Everything suggested that he had been looking forward to a quiet winter break, traveling home to Houston to spend time with his family. There were no signs of personal conflict, threats, or distress. Even his circle of friends and classmates offered nothing that could explain the disappearance. Investigators confirmed that neither his ex-girlfriend nor any close contacts had reason or opportunity to influence the events of that night. Authorities also examined environmental and accidental possibilities. Salt Flat Road was notorious for sudden icy patches in winter, and the gravel surface could cause a vehicle to spin if not navigated carefully. A theory emerged that Ethan may have overcorrected on a curve, causing the minor crash. But even if that were true, it did not explain why he left the vehicle in the dead of night, leaving his keys in the ignition, the car door locked, and his personal belongings scattered. Hypothermia could have impaired his decision-making, yet the complete disappearance into the surrounding terrain seemed improbable without leaving a trace. In months following, tips trickled in from locals and travelers. Some reported seeing a young man matching Ethan's description walking along rural roads, while others claimed to have spotted a lone vehicle near Salt Flat Road around the same time. Every tip was meticulously investigated, yet each one ended in disappointment. None provided a breakthrough, and slowly the urgency of the initial search faded into a tense, ongoing monitoring of the area. Despite the lack of progress, Richard and Meredith refused to give up. They met regularly with detectives, organized renewed search efforts, and publicized Ethan's story online. They contacted news outlets to ensure his case remained visible, hoping someone might recall a small but crucial detail from that night. Flyers remained posted at every highway rest stop and local business, and community volunteers conducted periodic searches, combing the woods and creek beds for any overlooked clue. As time passed, theories emerged. Some considered accidental wandering, suggesting Ethan had left the vehicle in a confused state and become lost in the surrounding fields or wooded areas. Others speculated about environmental dangers, including a creek with hidden currents or steep embankments that could have concealed his path. A third, darker theory, though lacking any direct evidence, contemplated the possibility of an encounter with a third party. Investigators were cautious with this line of thought, as no witnesses, surveillance footage, or forensic evidence pointed to foul play. Yet the disappearance remained so unusual that nearly every scenario required consideration. Investigators also revisited the hallucinogenic substances found in Ethan's backpack. Laboratory tests confirmed the presence of an unknown hallucinogenic component mixed with marijuana, but there was no proof that he had ingested it. While authorities did not rule out a drug-related incident entirely, his calm, measured driving prior to the crash and absence of erratic behavior suggested that substance use was unlikely to explain the full series of events. Even if impaired judgment played a role, the lack of footprints or traces in the surrounding terrain defied explanation. As the holidays approached the following year, the Cole family faced the emotional weight of 2 consecutive Christmases without Ethan. They spoke to friends and neighbors about coping with uncertainty, emphasizing hope tempered with realism. Counseling was offered for Richard and Meredith, and support groups for families of missing persons became an essential part of their routine. Yet no amount of preparation could shield them from the anxiety that each unfamiliar vehicle or distant noise might be connected to Ethan. Community involvement remained critical. Volunteers continued to maintain watch over Salt Flat Road and the surrounding rural areas. Flyers and online appeals served as reminders that the search had not ended, even as months became a year and then more. Law enforcement occasionally conducted routine sweeps of the terrain, ensuring that any potential evidence would be recovered if it emerged. The Cedarwood Police Department and Caldwell County Sheriff's Office expressed unwavering commitment to solving the case, though the challenges of the terrain, time elapsed, and lack of concrete leads made progress agonizingly slow. Forensic specialists continued to re-examine evidence in hopes of a breakthrough. The vehicle was revisited multiple times to analyze tire tracks, soil samples, and microscopic traces that might provide insight. Technology advanced, offering new possibilities for examining cellular data and environmental conditions, but each review only reinforced the perplexing nature of the disappearance. The abandoned items, tiny blood smear, and scattered clothing created a pattern that pointed to neither accident nor foul play with certainty. As years passed, the Cole family faced the daunting challenge of preserving their memories of Ethan while confronting the unknown. His room remained unchanged, filled with books, gaming consoles, and personal effects he had left behind. Each item became a poignant reminder of the life interrupted, a symbol of the mystery that had taken him away. Family photographs, letters, and videos were revisited constantly, sustaining both hope and grief. The case also caught the attention of amateur investigators and journalists specializing in missing person cases. Some speculated about the role of hallucinogenic substances, environmental hazards, or even encounters with wildlife. Others attempted to reconstruct his route, theorizing about the possibility of hidden paths, streams, or culverts that could explain the disappearance. While none of these theories produced verifiable evidence, they maintained public interest in the case and reinforced the broader narrative of uncertainty. Despite the passage of time, law enforcement continued to encourage residents to report anything unusual. Security footage from homes and businesses along Ethan's presumed route remained valuable, and police urged anyone with dash cam or cell camera footage from December 13th and 14th to come forward. Investigators stressed that even seemingly minor observations, such as a vehicle parked along Salt Flat Road, lights in the distance, or movement in the woods, could potentially provide critical context. The psychological toll on the family was immense. The lack of resolution left Richard and Meredith suspended between hope and despair. They organized community vigils, participated in awareness campaigns, and offered counseling to friends and neighbors who had been affected by the case. Each year, December 13th and 14th became days of remembrance and reflection, marked not by celebration, but by quiet, enduring concern. Even as the investigation slowed to a more deliberate pace, the case of Ethan Cole remained open. Detectives maintained periodic contact with the family, reviewed new tips, and occasionally conducted field sweeps in areas previously inaccessible. Advances in forensic science offered hope that evidence overlooked or untraceable years ago could one day provide answers. The case became a reference point in discussions about missing persons, accidental disappearances, and the challenges of investigating incidents in rural, low-traffic areas. Ultimately, the story of Ethan Cole serves as a reminder of how ordinary circumstances can evolve into extraordinary mysteries. A routine drive home, a minor accident, and the presence of environmental and human variables intersected to create a situation that defied conventional explanation. His disappearance highlights the fragility of life, the limits of human understanding, and the enduring impact of uncertainty on families and communities. For Richard and Meredith Cole, the search continues, not only for tangible evidence of their son, but also for understanding, closure, and the faint possibility that one day answers will emerge from the shadows of Salt Flat Road. Until then, the memory of Ethan and the unresolved mystery of that winter night remains central to their lives, a haunting enigma that illustrates the complexity of a world in which ordinary events can suddenly become unexplainable, life-altering, and tragically unresolved. On the morning of June 11th, 2022, the heat had already settled over the town of Brookhaven, Missouri. It was the kind of early summer day that made everything feel sluggish, as though the air itself was heavy. For Denise Carter, that heaviness had nothing to do with the weather. It had been days since she last heard from her daughter, and the silence felt wrong. 22-year-old Lily Carter was not the kind of person who disappeared without explanation. She checked in, she answered calls, she texted back, even if it was just a single word. And now, at 8 months pregnant, she was even more careful about staying in touch. Denise tried calling again, straight to voicemail. By late morning, Denise could no longer ignore the feeling growing in her chest. She grabbed her keys and drove across town to Willow Court Apartments, a modest complex of beige buildings and narrow sidewalks. Lily had lived there for less than a year, in a small one-bedroom unit on the second floor. It wasn't perfect, but it was affordable, close to public transit, and close enough for Denise to visit often. As Denise climbed the stairs, she noticed something small but unsettling. Lily's curtains were open. That wasn't like her. Lily liked privacy, especially since neighbors could easily see into the apartment from the parking lot. Denise knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time, calling her daughter's name. Still nothing. Denise tried the door. It was unlocked. What she found inside would change her life forever. Lily Carter had always been gentle in ways that made her vulnerable. She was soft-spoken, empathetic, and deeply hopeful, even when life gave her reasons not to be. Friends described her as someone who believed people could change if given enough patience and love. She met Marcus Hale when she was just 20. He was 3 years older, charming at first, intense in a way that felt exciting. Their relationship was complicated from the start. They broke up and got back together repeatedly over the course of 2 years. Each reconciliation came with promises. Each separation came with emotional damage. Denise never liked Marcus. She tried to be polite for Lily's sake, but she saw the warning signs early. Marcus was controlling. He isolated Lily from friends. He had a temper that surfaced unexpectedly. Denise confronted him more than once, telling him directly that the way he treated her daughter was unacceptable. Marcus listened. He nodded. He promised to do better. He never did. By the time Lily found out she was pregnant, she and Marcus were no longer officially together. He drifted in and out of her life, sometimes supportive, sometimes distant, sometimes angry. Denise knew one thing for certain. The baby was not Marcus's. Lily had told her plainly, and Denise believed her. That fact only seemed to deepen Marcus's resentment. In the final weeks of Lily's life, those closest to her noticed changes. She seemed tired, withdrawn, emotionally worn down. Pregnancy had been hard on her body, but it was the emotional strain that worried Denise the most. Lily confided that Marcus had been showing up unannounced, leaving angry messages, demanding conversations she did not want to have. Denise urged her daughter to distance herself completely. "Cut him off," she said more than once. "He's not safe for you." Lily tried, but Marcus always found a way back into her orbit. Unbeknownst to many at the time, Marcus was struggling with severe mental health issues. He had spoken to family members about hearing a voice, something he referred to by name, something he claimed guided his actions. He had briefly been hospitalized for evaluation earlier that year to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial in an unrelated matter. He was released. No one knew how close disaster already was. Denise would later struggle to describe exactly what she saw inside Lily's apartment, not because she didn't remember, but because no words felt adequate. She screamed. Neighbors called police. Officers arrived within minutes, clearing the building and sealing off the unit. Lily was gone. The crime scene suggested extreme violence, but authorities were careful with details. What mattered most was this: Lily and her unborn child had been taken from the world in a way that no family should ever endure. The apartment complex was thrown into chaos. Police vehicles lined the parking lot. Residents stood in clusters, whispering, crying, watching as forensic teams went in and out of the building. Denise sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket, unable to process what had happened. She kept asking the same question: where is he? Investigators didn't have to look far. Marcus Hale was already under arrest in a neighboring county, held on a minor theft charge. When Brookhaven detectives reviewed Lily's case, his name surfaced immediately. The history, the proximity, the volatile relationship. It all pointed to him. Local police contacted the county jail where Marcus was being held. Officers there confirmed something troubling. Marcus had been acting erratically since his arrest. He spoke about voices. He made statements that raised immediate concern. Detectives traveled to interview him. Marcus did not resist. As investigators pieced together the timeline, they learned that Marcus had been in Lily's apartment the night she was last seen alive. Phone records confirmed it. Witnesses placed him near the complex. Surveillance footage showed his vehicle entering and leaving the area. What remained unclear was motive: anger, control, resentment, a refusal to accept that Lily had moved on. Investigators would later say this was not a crime of passion in the traditional sense. It was calculated, it was deliberate, and it was devastating. When Denise was informed that Marcus was the primary suspect, she felt no shock, only a crushing confirmation of what she had feared all along. "I warned him," she said quietly. "I warned him." News spread quickly through Brookhaven. Vigils formed outside the apartment complex. Strangers left flowers, candles, stuffed animals. Messages appeared online from people who had never met Lily but were shaken by her story. A young woman, a baby nearly ready to be born, a life cut short. As the investigation moved forward, authorities prepared for a legal process that would stretch on for years: psychological evaluations, competency hearings, court delays. Each step added another layer of pain for Lily's family. But one thing was certain: this was not an accident. This was not a mystery. And justice, however delayed, would be pursued. The days following Lily Carter's death passed in a blur of procedures, interviews, and unbearable waiting. For Denise and the rest of the family, time no longer moved in a straight line. It stalled, then lurched forward without warning. Every phone call made her flinch. Every knock at the door carried dread. Marcus Hale was transferred from the county jail to Brookhaven within 48 hours. Detectives wanted him close. They wanted answers. From the moment he arrived, it was clear they were dealing with someone unstable, but not incoherent. Marcus knew where he was. He knew why he was there. He spoke calmly when he chose to speak at all. During his first interview, Marcus asked for water. He asked if Lily's mother was safe. Then he went silent. Detectives pressed gently at first. They asked about his relationship with Lily, about when he had last seen her, about his whereabouts the night before her body was discovered. Marcus gave fragmented answers. Sometimes he stared at the table for long stretches before responding. Other times he spoke too quickly, as if words were spilling out faster than he could control them. He mentioned the voice. He did not say it told him to kill. He was careful with his words. He said it guided him, that it helped him understand what needed to be done. When asked to clarify, he shook his head and said he didn't want to talk about it without a lawyer present. The interview ended there. Prosecutors moved quickly. Marcus was charged with first-degree murder, homicide of an unborn child, and concealment of a human body. The charges reflected the scale of what had been done, but the legal process ahead was anything but straightforward. Almost immediately, Marcus's defense raised concerns about his mental competency. He was transferred to a state psychiatric facility for evaluation. For Denise, this felt like a second nightmare layered on top of the first. She worried that mental illness would be used as a shield, that accountability would be diluted, that Lily's life would be reduced to a technical argument. Weeks passed. Evaluators assessed Marcus's ability to understand the charges against him and assist in his own defense. Reports described a man with long-standing psychological disturbances, paranoia, and auditory hallucinations, but they also noted something important. Marcus understood the legal process. He understood right and wrong. He understood consequences. He was deemed competent to stand trial. The case returned to Brookhaven. As evidence was cataloged, the picture became clearer. Phone records showed repeated contact initiated by Marcus in the days leading up to Lily's death, messages that escalated in tone, missed calls late at night, voicemails Lily never returned. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices from Lily's apartment on the evening before her death, nothing specific enough to call police, just tension, anger, a familiar pattern no one realized had reached its breaking point. Inside the apartment, forensic teams found no signs of forced entry. That fact alone spoke volumes. Lily knew her attacker. She had let him inside. Denise struggled with that knowledge. She replayed every conversation she had ever had with her daughter, every warning she gave, every moment she wondered if she could have done more. Marcus's past became part of the public record as court proceedings unfolded. He had a history of unstable behavior, minor offenses, and strained relationships. Family members described him as withdrawn, volatile, and increasingly disconnected from reality. His stepfather testified that Marcus had spoken about a voice he called by name, something that seemed to grow stronger during periods of stress or substance use. Experts were careful in their testimony. They explained that mental illness does not remove responsibility, that hearing voices does not automatically mean a person lacks control, that many people live with severe psychological symptoms without harming others. The prosecution emphasized this repeatedly. This was not a moment of confusion, they argued. This was an act of violence carried out with intent. As pre-trial hearings continued, Denise attended every session. She sat quietly behind the prosecution table, holding a small photo of Lily in her purse. It was from a summer day years earlier. Lily was smiling, hair pulled back, sunlight on her face. Denise touched the photo whenever the weight of the courtroom became too heavy. Marcus avoided looking at her. At one hearing, a recorded phone call between Marcus and his mother was introduced as evidence. In it, Marcus minimized what had happened. He spoke vaguely, detached from reality. He misremembered Lily's name. He framed events as though they had simply occurred around him rather than because of him. The call chilled the courtroom. It revealed not remorse, but distance, emotional vacancy, an attempt to rewrite reality into something more tolerable. Defense attorneys argued that Marcus's mental illness had warped his perception beyond repair. They suggested treatment, long-term care, anything but the harshest possible sentence. The prosecution responded with restraint. They spoke of Lily, of her pregnancy, of the future that had been erased. They reminded the court that compassion for mental illness could not eclipse justice for a victim who had no choice. The trial date loomed, but in the end, it never came. Marcus changed his plea. On a cold morning in January 2025, he stood before the judge and pled guilty to all charges. There were no dramatic statements, no apology, just a quiet acknowledgement of responsibility. The courtroom was silent. Sentencing followed weeks later. The judge spoke at length about the gravity of the crimes, the irreversible harm done, and the need to protect society. Marcus was sentenced to 60 years in prison. He was led away in handcuffs, his expression unreadable. For Denise, there was no sense of closure, only a dull finality. The legal process had ended, but grief had not. It never would. After the sentencing, Denise spoke briefly to reporters. She did not shout. She did not cry. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "My daughter mattered," she said, "and so did her baby. I want people to remember that." Marcus was transferred to a maximum security facility hours away. There, he would spend the rest of his life. Some wondered whether prison would help someone like him, whether treatment behind bars could reach the darkness that had already done so much damage. Denise did not concern herself with those questions anymore. Her focus turned to memory. She packed up Lily's apartment herself, folded clothes, sorted letters, found ultrasound photos tucked into a drawer. Each item was a reminder of a life interrupted. At night, she sometimes thought about the voice Marcus claimed to hear, about the nature of evil, about whether some people are simply broken beyond repair, or whether something deeper moves through them when violence erupts. She did not pretend to know the answers. What she knew was this: Lily had trusted the wrong person. She had tried to start over. She had deserved more time, and no explanation, psychological or otherwise, could ever justify what was taken from her. In the months after the sentencing, Brookhaven slowly returned to its routines, but the space Lily Carter had occupied never truly closed. The apartment complex repainted the hallway where investigators once stood. New tenants moved into her unit. The town calendar filled with ordinary events again. On the surface, life continued. Underneath, something had shifted. Denise felt it every time she drove past the grocery store Lily used to visit, every time she heard a laugh that sounded just close enough to her daughter's. Grief did not arrive as a single, overwhelming force. It came in small, precise moments. An empty chair, a name spoken in the past tense, a future that no longer needed planning because it would never happen. She attended counseling, though she disliked the word. Talking helped, but it did not heal. Nothing could. What it did was give shape to the ache, make it something she could carry without collapsing. People asked her how she felt about Marcus Hale now that he was gone, locked behind concrete and steel. She never gave the answer they expected. She did not hate him in the way people imagine hate. There was no fire left for that. What she felt was distance, a deliberate separation between her daughter's life and the man who ended it. Marcus faded from public conversation quickly. He became a case file, a DOC number, a name occasionally referenced in discussions about mental health and violence. In prison, he remained withdrawn. Records later showed he participated in treatment programs inconsistently. Some days he spoke about the voice. Other days he denied it existed at all. Psychiatrists noted improvement in certain behaviors and stagnation in others. None of it changed the outcome. What lingered was the question everyone asked quietly but rarely out loud. Could this have been prevented? Friends remembered moments that felt different in hindsight. Lily canceling plans, Lily checking her phone too often, Lily saying she was tired but not explaining why. None of it had seemed urgent at the time. None of it crossed the invisible line where intervention feels justified. That line is always clearer after tragedy. Denise struggled with guilt over this more than anything else. She had known Lily was uneasy about Marcus. She had encouraged distance. She had believed that distance would be enough. It wasn't. Community leaders organized a candlelight vigil on the anniversary of Lily's death. It was small, quiet, respectful. Denise stood at the edge of the crowd, holding a candle she barely noticed burning. When it was her turn to speak, she hesitated. Public words felt fragile, but she spoke anyway. She talked about Lily's kindness, about how she laughed too loudly and loved early morning walks. She talked about the baby Lily never got to meet, a life imagined but never lived. She did not talk about Marcus. She refused to let him define the memory. Afterward, people hugged her, said the things people always say. "You're strong. She's at peace. She would be proud of you." Denise nodded, thanked them, and went home alone. Strength was a performance she could manage in public. In private, she allowed herself to fall apart. She cried when she needed to. She slept when exhaustion overtook her. She learned that grief did not move forward in neat stages. It circled back, repeated itself, changed shape. Over time, Denise began volunteering with a local support group for families affected by violent crime. She didn't offer advice. She listened. She understood silence in a way only someone who had lived through it could. Parents asked her how she survived. She told them she didn't always feel like she was. She told them survival wasn't a goal. It was a byproduct of continuing to breathe. The case became a point of reference in broader conversations about warning signs, about untreated mental illness, about the danger of dismissing obsession as intensity. Experts cited it cautiously, aware of the risk of oversimplification. Mental illness, they reminded audiences, does not equal violence. Most people struggling psychologically never harm anyone. But patterns still matter. Escalation matters. Control matters. Fear matters. Lily had felt fear. That truth remained the hardest one to accept. Denise often thought about the night Lily let Marcus inside. She imagined Lily believing the conversation would be quick, that it would end, that boundaries would finally hold. Trust, after all, is not always a mistake. Sometimes it is simply human. Marcus never spoke publicly again. No interviews, no statements. In one psychiatric note, he reportedly said he did not think about Lily much anymore. The past, he claimed, felt unreal. For Denise, the past was constant. She kept Lily's room at home untouched for a long time. Eventually, she changed it, not because she wanted to forget, but because she wanted to live alongside the memory without being trapped inside it. She framed a photo of Lily and placed it in the living room, not hidden, not overwhelming, just present. Years from now, people will remember this case differently. Some will focus on the legal outcome, others on the mental health debates it sparked. Some will remember only fragments, a headline, a name. But the truth of what happened exists beyond analysis. A woman lost her life. A child never got born. A family was altered forever. There is no lesson that makes that acceptable. If there is meaning to be found, it lies not in explaining Marcus Hale, but in listening more carefully to those who sense danger before it becomes visible, in taking fear seriously, in believing people when they say something is wrong, even if they cannot articulate exactly what. Denise does not believe everything happens for a reason. She believes things happen and humans assign meaning afterward because meaning is easier than randomness. What she believes now is simpler. Pay attention, intervene early, do not minimize discomfort, and remember the names of those who were gone. Lily Carter was more than a case. She was more than a victim. She was a life unfinished but real. And her story does not belong to the man who ended it. It belongs to those who carry her forward, quietly, stubbornly, refusing to let her disappear into silence.